Okay, we are going to start Pachad Yitzchok on Purim, as is our wont, so to speak. Just let me check here something, make sure that we're not missing anybody. Okay, I think we're okay. Yes. All right. So we are going to on the side of the screen. If you're watching on Google Hangouts, there is the link to the handout. If you need that link and you don't have it there because you're on YouTube, so then either it's available. Let's go. I'll just see if I can post the link here. Well, I don't know. Not sure how to do it, but I think that it should post there too if it's posted here. In any event, we are starting from the Pachad Yitzchok in Inyan Vav, which is on page Membeis. B'Shas, we have to go back to Hay if we have time, but let's go back. I want to do Vav tonight. B'Shas Sudas Purim, Shal Echad Min Ha-Mesubin. At the time of Sudas Purim, one of the people who was around the table asked the following question. In Apis Moshe Shanas Yaakov Iskabel Tfutzos Yisrael B'Torah Zemer Simchas Purim. The Zemer of Shanas Yaakov was accepted in all the exiles, the diasporas of the Jews around the world as the Zemer for Simchas Purim, the Miros, so to speak, of Purim. It's an astonishing thing. To not know the difference between Or Haman and Baruch Mordechai is critical, it seems, to fulfill the obligations in Chas Purim. If that's the case, how's it possible that Zemer Hamadgish Pavlota, which emphasizes with great stress, as Yisera, additional high, much stress, as a Yediyah shall have Dashman Or Haman and Baruch Mordechai, knowing the difference between Or Haman and Baruch Mordechai, Yishamish Bitoy, should serve as an expression of Avodas Hayom Shel Simchas Purim, of the Avodah of the day of Simchas Purim. It's an astonishing thing. We want to encourage you for getting Or Haman Baruch Mordechai, and yet this is exactly what we're telling you in Shoshanas Yaakov. Maybe we should also think Shoshanas Yaakov at the Purim Suda. Maybe we should only be allowed to be sung in shul after the Megillah. But in any event, let's do Pachad Yitzchok's question. Yeshli Yashev, of course, in many different ways, but let's see how the Pachad Yitzchok addresses the issue. Tshuva. We have to go mention here a basic fundamental principle, which is we repeat and go over again, and constantly go and explain over again in deeper to a deeper extent on a frequent basis. When we distinguish in the difference which is found between two matters in there, which is similar on the surface. Excuse me. When it's hard to tell the difference in the surface, then obviously the difference is internal and profoundly deep. And the more out of superficial surfaces at which level the impression seems to be that they are similar, correspond to this. Sorry, one of my Talmidim had difficulty getting on. I hope you're on now. Where the more levels of superficial similarity which exist, the more we have to probe deeper beneath the surface and find the distinction, which is perhaps very, very deep. And That is the way which there is a manner in which we fulfill the cognition of, I should start that sentence over again. And therefore, in understanding this distinction, you start with a cognition of how similar the things are. In other words, you have to first see how similar A and B are to appreciate how the depth of distinction which lies deeply underneath the surface of the similarities of A and B. So first we have to say these things are equal, they're similar. Then we can appreciate and how in the depths they're actually very, very different. Okay, so the closer we have done in the Torah, in any type of differentiation which is in the Torah, there is no greater difference. Me'asher havdalah b'agrol Yom Kippurim than the distinction between the two goats which are brought as offerings on Yom Kippur. They are one goes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, one is a korban, and one goes la'azazel. Whatever azazel means, it ain't a good thing, and it is not a korban. It's rolled down the cliff or in the middle of the desert. So they're very, very different in their outcome, how they're treated, and so on and so forth. One is destined to God, and the other is destined to Azazel. Chuda shall havdalah hazu, the point of this distinction, it pricks the flesh. In other words, it's a needle sharp difference. To the point that how can we possibly put the two in the same category? It's such a sharp distinction. How can we possibly put them together? Yet, but specifically here, in the place where there is the greatest possible distinction, you'd say so. First, that's to come the avoda of linkage, a parallelism, to the utmost. Because according to halacha, shnei hasirim halolu, these two goats, which are destined to such dramatic differences, LaHashem u'Azazel, to God and to Azazel, again, whatever that means, become a maradomin. They have to be equivalent in their stature, in their look, in their countenance, and in their value. When you start out, they have to be very, very similar. Only later on do you find that they are not similar at all. That ultimately they are vastly and extraordinarily different in where they're going. So imagine the guy who's going out to Kohen, wherever it is, who's going out to buy these two goats in the marketplace. And he's trying to figure out with precision whether the price is exact. In order to make these two goats precise in their value. It would seem that he's trying to bring a parallelism, an equation, and a similarity of two things to each other. In other words, he's trying to create the greatest possible parable, the greatest possible similarity. But in the depths, the approach is really the opposite, the antithesis from end to end. That all of this engagement, involvement in this process, a noba elagalos, where it only comes to clarify and to reveal as omekamka, the ultimate deepest of the deep, shall havdalah of distinction, asher bepulas hagrol, which comes about as a result of the lottery in the Beis Hamikdash, which is LaHashem and which is LaAzazel. Because the more superficial layers at which two things are considered to be, can be considered to be equivalent, can be considered to be similar, in proportion to that, the distinction between the two, which comes through the lottery, goes down to the deepest levels and depths. This goes back to something which I say very often. which is that I was once speaking to Rabbi Simon Zissel Broida, who was a child, the Rosh Hashiva of the Chem Yeshiva Yerushalayim. I said to him, "You're from the school of Slabodka." Obviously, I spoke to him in the third person, but I said to him, "School so you're from the school of Slabodka." And in Slabodka, they talk about the greatness of all the figures in Tanakh. And is it true that, according to Slabodka, if Esav would come to the base Medrash, we would put him out, perceive him as a great Rosh Hashiva, one of the Gedolei Hador. We would put him on the Mizrach in the most honored of seats, because to us he would seem like the most important, significant, and profound Talmid Chacham we ever met. And he said, yes, exactly that. That's precisely what Esav looked like. If Esav looked like a cowboy, if Esav looked like a stormtrooper, so then we'd have no problem recognizing the distinction between Esav and Yaakov. But Esav and Yaakov, it's not like that. It's not a major distinction, which is obvious to everybody. It's very subtle, very profound, very deep. But there, it is very, very, the gap is enormous. In other words, if it starts like this, it goes down like that. Sometimes when it's on the surface, things are very dissimilar. When you come down to it, they're similar inside. If you have a fascist and a communist, in the end, they seem very, very different, but in the end, they are very similar in the driving traits which are behind them. Not for naught do people draw parallels between supporters of one of the extremist candidates in this race for president and the other extremist candidate in this race for president, because there are similarities where the dissimilarities are great. It's on the surface. The similarities are great in the depths. When the similarities are great on the surface, then it's quite possible that the dissimilarities are profound when you get down deep. Let's continue this vein. The original goat. Why a goat's called Seirim? Because they're hairy. So who's the original hairy one? Who Isha Soyer Rishon is the first hairy person? Hello, Esav Ish Soyer. Esav, the hairy man, as described in Chumash. Havdalah ben Soyer Hazel ben Achiv, the distinction between this hairy guy and his brother. It's got to be penetrate to the greatest depth. It's not apparent. Contrary to our assumption, contrary to what the drawing books might have, Esav and Yaakov looked similar. You think Yitzchok was fooled by somebody who looked like he was a gangster? No. Yitzchok was fooled by somebody who looked like a Rosh Hashiva. He has to go down which dwells underneath, culminating on all types of similarities. The sugya shivyon and possibilities of equation. Hashotim b'chol shtochim al yonim, which are the parent at all the higher levels, in other words, the more superficial levels of the comparison. Hatzafim, which float, agabe, lagav shomekov adolazu, on over the depths of this distinction. And the pasuk shouts and says, Ach Esav Yaakov. Esav is a brother to Yaakov. V'ahavas Yaakov is Esav's fanesi. And nevertheless, I loved Yaakov and I detested Esav. Klomar, meaning, Esav Yaakov, the depths and the tell him is much more profound word than depths, the chasm of distinction. Between Esav Yaakov, Mizbarer Sidaf, it only becomes clear but after the powerful recognition, ba'achva, in the brotherhood of the Dimayin and the similarity between them. There, hello, Achu Esav, hello, Ach Esav Yaakov, says or a footnote that means from the surface you can tell the difference. Yes, I know Yaakov, Esav was Sa'ir, and Yaakov was Chalak, Esav was hairy, Yaakov was smooth-skinned. But that's not necessarily the real difference between the two. That's just happens to be a physical characteristic. And physically, you got a person who's very hairy, who is holy, and a person who's very smooth-skinned, who is not holy. That doesn't mean anything. But what's the distinction? The Zohar first, this is the awesome secret. Like we mentioned before, Avatz Yitzchok Esav, why Yitzchok loved Esav. Havdalah ben Yaakov Esav, the distinction between Yaakov and Esav, mefafas hiba mamokim elu. It permeates such depths. In other words, it's only present in such depths. That it has to pass through the greatest equality before you can reach that great distinction. And what is the great similarity, the greatest similarity between Yaakov and Esav? It's a love which Yitzchok bestowed on Esav. Now, many Mefarshim say that Yaakov was spread his love inappropriately, and that Esav got more love, and it was a mistake, and it was a parenting issue. Even the Malbim says something along those lines, of Sham Shomfal Hirsch, but that is not the way we in the Musar schools, so to speak, if I can associate myself with them, would interpret this, but rather the love to Esav was a chiddush. Love to Yaakov was pushed. He also loved Esav with such an intensity, not to the detriment of Yaakov, but because Esav also, in his eyes, deserved that love, and perhaps he felt that there was a certain wildness or something which required there to be additional love, but the love was equivalent. Lumazos, on the other side, Gam Havdalah Hayosetom is also the most deep distinction, by Yosetos, and most fundamental distinction, between the merits of Esav and Yaakov. Nishtarsha was rooted in Beis Abba, in their father's house. Because distinction is found in the distinction b'chiluk sheba'birchosav sheyitzuk le'Esav Yaakov Esav, in the brachas between which and how they're different between Yaakov and Esav. And in order that this distinction should be at the deepest of the deep, it was compelling that this distinction, the deepest distinction of the brachos, should come about through the equation of the love of the father. And the very fact that the brachos of Yitzchak came out of his love of Esav, that's the beginning of it. The very major difference comes through the very profound, evident, superficial similarity. Now let's explain that a little bit. The bracha which Yaakov gave Esav, which Yitzchak gave Esav, was let's start the other way. The bracha which Yitzchak gave Yaakov was the bracha he wanted to give to Esav. He wanted to give to Esav a very profound bracha because, from his perspective, Esav was the firstborn. There was no real distinction between Esav and Yaakov. He loved both equally, and therefore Esav deserves the major bracha since he's a Kodesh Hashem, just like Yaakov. And Yaakov deserves, since he's not the firstborn, the secondary bracha, which is a nice bracha, but is the secondary bracha. So, from Yaakov's perspective, from Yitzchak's perspective, they're entirely equal. Specifically because of that equality, which Rivka even embellished by adding on the okay, good night, Morty. By adding on the goat hangings, which the goat skin, by which she convinced Yaakov that Yitzchak, by which Yaakov convinced Yitzchak that he was actually Esav. That was essential, that there should be this equation in order to demonstrate the profound difference between the two, which didn't even come about through Yitzchak's knowledge, but rather through HaKadosh Baruch Hu's bringing out the truth. It's the Gemara in Baba Kama says that when it's Esav is like a pig. A pig puts out its hooves and says, "I'm pure. I have split hooves." It's only when you cut it open, you see inside, it doesn't chew its cud. So the idea is the same. Esav looks, for all intents and purposes, like he's a Kodesh Hashem. You're only going to be able to find out that he's not a Kodesh Hashem if you dig deep inside. Even Yitzchak wasn't capable of making that distinction. the distinction was so profound. It was so deep. But when you get to it, it's so essential. And this is an important idea in all things in Olam Hazeh, which are good and evil are made similar in order that we should be able to, on the surface, equate the two, and that it should be a avoda, a difficulty, to get down to the level where they're distinct from each other. And that when we get down there, we'll realize with a shock and with a profound sense of awe how really different they are. And that the similarity was the pathway by which we began the avodah of then finding the distinction. But without the similarity, there's no getting at the profound distinction. You know why? Because then you get stuck on this. Let's say there was a small difference between Yaakov and Esav, right? A small difference. So then you never come to the recognition of the profound difference between the two. You say, hey, Yaakov is a good guy, Esav is a bad guy. It stops there. No, that's not. That superficial remains superficial. In order to make you dig down deep and be shocked and awed by what you find, the similarity on the surface has to be as great as possible. And then, well, somebody tells you, but they're different. And you say, no, they're not different. They're the same. The guy says, they're different. Check it out. And then you have to dig down deep. And then you come into that tremendous, cavernous difference between the two of them. But you wouldn't have found it if you would have found a superficial distinction. You would have just stopped there. So therefore, we need everything to be similar on the surface in order to get down deep and find the distinction. Because going on here, this entire perspective is essential to understanding the avodah of Purim in eradicating the seed of Esav, which is Amalek, of course. The requirement to get inebriated until you don't know the distinction. We think we think that this inebriation captures the essence of the day of Purim. But if we think that way, we're making a great mistake. Rather, this is the way to understand it. On the day in which we eradicate the descendants of Esav, the flame which is kindled in the totality of its possible existence. Remember, base Yaakov Eish, Ubeis Yosef L'Hava, Ubeis Esav L'Kash, V'lietosam. Right? Amalek is the day in which Beis Yaakov and Beis Yosef, of course, Beis Yosef includes Binyamin, and we know, and that Mordechai, come together and make that fire which burns the straw of Esav. But this Shalheves, this flame, Shalheves Avdollah ben Yaakov Esav, is the flame of the distinction between Yaakov and Esav, not the similarity the superficial inebriation brings about. And as I mentioned, this flame does not burn properly, except when it is fueled by the wick and the oil of the powerful similarity, and the profundity of the seeming equality, the equation, between these two vastly different things. So we get inebriated. And when we get to that level, remember, of course, Yom Purim, Yom Kippurim. So the avodah Purim is like the avodah of Yom Kippur. The avodah Yom Kippur is, first you start with 2 seirim, 2 goats, which are similar. We get to this point at the time when we're drunk, but Dugma shall also ish hamekadish, we're similar to that person who's trying to sanctify the 2 goats, who's trying to always effort to equate the two. And how they look, and then the stature, and how much they cost. He also at that point is a person who doesn't know distinction or cannot perceive the distinction between the Soy Hashem and Soy Lasos. They look similar. V'zeu ad lo yadash Yom Kippurim. After Yom Kippur is the similarity of the goats before the lottery takes place. Yom Purim is sold Yom Kippurim, and Purim on the basis of that secret and that fundamental connection between your Purim and Yom Kippur. Only anachnu bivusami. We become drunk, v'amelim and toil. V'avodas hashvah shel orah labaruch. Equating orah to baruch. Kidei she'achar kach nishlachis ha'orah la'azazel. We'll send the cursed one to Azazel. Mitoch havdolah muchletes. With a complete distinction. Nidbakim anachnu, and we cling. Ba'agona zchuso sheyitzchok avinu. In the zchus of Yitzchok, shelo yatzach michshol me'avodah ha'mesukenes ha'ashvah. That in the end, the dangerous avodah of the equation between Esav and Yaakov did not end up with the bracha going to Esav, and he was saved from that potential michshol. Shehui Arishon, Shadavka De'abasa le'Esav. He was the first one, by specifically his love to Esav. Nizgargulu ha'brachos l'yado shel Yaakov. The brachos went elsewhere; they went to Yaakov. So, first you have to be mashva Or Haman to Baruch Mordechai. It's an amazing answer. Ad lo yada ben Or Haman to Baruch Mordechai. You don't know. You have to first see Haman as a great, great person. You have to first see the attractiveness, which is in Ra, but not Ra, which is, a gangster, not Ra, which is a criminal, not Ra, blue-collar crime, but Ra, when it's mischapes, it takes on the costume of good. That's why when you darshan the Megillah with the Melech, Malchi, Amlochim, because any place where it says HaMelech, it's Melech, Malchi, Amlochim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Haman becomes a great Navi, a great Talmid Chacham, a great Chategor, a prosecutor against Bnei Yisrael, and a profound Kabbalist. So that is the Asa, that's the Haman, which has to be negated on that day of Purim. Not the Haman of the three-cornered hat and the nasty mustache and the stormtrooper clothing. No, not that Haman. First there has to be the Ashva. First has to be the equivalency between Haman and Mordechai. It's the opposite, although he has to break it down here, of Yitzias Mitzrayim. Halol of Deir Zar, halol of Deir Zar, Avodah Zarah. The Malachim said to Kosh Baruch Hu, they're both idolaters, both the Egyptians and the Jews. Why save the Jews? Even the Malachim couldn't show understand the distinction between the Bnei Yisrael and the non-Jews. It took Kriyas Yamsuf to actually draw the distinction. It took actually not Kriyas Yamsuf, but the standing by Yamsuf before the Kriya, when they cried out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when Nachshon took the first step. All of that was necessary to draw that distinction in the eyes of Shamayim and Oretz. But before that, the equation had to be absolute. Again, there was a negative equation. Here has the absolute and a positive equation. If we dumb down Haman, we do a disservice to the nature of Purim. It goes on. It's very dangerous to equate that which is good and that which is evil, because the evil is superficially good and seems to be a positive thing. It's very dangerous because then the evil becomes attractive. If I can say this, and that's why Chazal say again, not here, it doesn't bring down, but Shat Misa Mitzadik Rosh Ben Yovel Asher Lo Avodo. You know, between Tzadik and Rosh, a person who serves Hashem, a person who doesn't serve Hashem. Eino Deime Mishashana Pirko Mea Pamim, Mishashana Pirko Mea Ve'echad Pamim. There's no correlation between a person who learned the sugya 100 times, a person who learns sugya 101 times. Which is stunning, because they're clearly both are tzaddikim. Both are Tamid Chachamim, I'm saying. Sorry. They're both Tamid Chachamim. They're both great Tamid Chachamim. The 101st time probably doesn't make such a difference, but Chazal is telling us, no, you have to, in order to be mavchin, ben toiv l'ra, you have to be able to be mavchin. In order to distinguish between good and bad, you have to be able to distinguish between the 100 and 101. Even they're both good. Even there's a minute difference, you can only sometimes tell the difference between tzaddik and a rasha. The same way, you can tell the difference between oiv elokim hashalav ado of 100 and 101 times. It's a very, very profound distinction, which is very, very invisible on the surface, and it's very dangerous to go and equate the two, because if you equate the 100 to 101, you might miss a whole difference between tzaddik and a rasha. Again, not that 101 people are different tzaddikim or different talmidei chachamim. They're very similar, but sometimes the dakas, the difference between tzaddik and rasha, is the same distinction as between the 100 and 101st time. Amazing concept. So therefore, you have to. It's a very dangerous thing to be mashveh the two, and it's very likely that being mashveh, equating the two, is going to lead you into very dangerous directions. And therefore, he says, the only time you can make that ashva between Haman, an equivalence between Haman and Mordechai, is in the Purim Surah. Asher b'Surah zu tov leiv hamelech v'yayin. The heart of the king is gladdened by the wine. And shetov libo shemanko shel olam b'yayin haviyain havdola. The heart of Hakadosh Baruch Hu is, so to speak, exalted with the wine of the Havdalah. Asher bo mavdi ben Yisrael la'amin. And again, this is something which he doesn't point out, but Tzaddik all over, of course, and the elsewhere says that many times that the whole point of Shichrus on Purim, is that even the state of Ad Lo Yoda, our Yedias Hashem, is so much a part of us that our Shichrus is different than somebody else's Shichrus. That when a Jew gets a shikr, if he's really has that previous, which sometimes is a developed thing, doesn't necessarily come out automatically, then even without das, without das, it's intuitive, it's integral to the Jewish neshama, intrinsic to the Jewish neshama, that Hashem are looking. So that is the time when a person is drunk and he has no das, so to speak, that we see that nevertheless he's David Hashem. So that's the time when it's okay for a person to have this connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the connection of, that's the time of the connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu exists, that then HaKadosh Baruch Hu also responds to us in a way in which he gives us the capacity to draw the distinction after the equation. I messed that up a bit, but you get the idea. The equivalency comes as a result of the capacity of a person to know that even when things all look the same, right? When a person is drunk, everything is still the same. No, it's still HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is behind everything. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is present behind everything. HaKadosh Baruch Hu perceives us and gives us the perception of him being behind the cracks. And that there's the thing to say, after all said and done, and everything looks the same. No, it's not. Behind the Shemitzkabel Pizmon Shoshanas Yaakov, the Pizmon Shosimchas Purim. That's why the Zemer of Shoshanas Yaakov is the Zemer of Purim. Or Haman Asher Bikash Labdi Baruch Mordechai Yehudi. That's the lottery, which comes after the similarity. Shoshanas Yaakov comes after Ad Lo Yoda. And it comes to tell us, no, Haman is a bad guy. Mordechai is a good guy. There are certain people who seem to be tzaddikim, who are really leading us to a lavdi. Certain people who seem to be rishoyim, but really deep down could be big tzaddikim. Any other day of the year, it's impossible to perceive that. You need to have the special hashra, the special spirit of Purim in order to perceive that and to understand the difference between that which is good and that which is bad, that which is on the surface very similar, but underneath is very, very different. It is the lottery which determines which goat is going out, which is going inside to the Kodesh Kodashim, holiness. It's not possible to have this lottery, this distinction emerge unless first everything is equivalent. When there is the inebriation, that you don't know the difference between the Orah side and the Baruch side, which then Shoshanas Yaakov Tzahala V'Samecha, when we are shouting and joyous, then afterwards comes the Or Haman Baruch Mordechai. So it's a very big chiddush la'alocha. There's Pachad Yitzchok. Yitzchok saying that Adlo Yoda Chayvin Shemsumi Adlo Yoda Ben Or Haman Baruch Mordechai. That's only stage one. Then after a person reaches that level of Adlo Yoda, he has to get to the next stage. After the hashva of the equivalency of choosing the goats, he has to get the distinction that the Kohen Gadol made. We made the lottery on Yom Kippur between the goat LaHashem and the goat LaZazel, between Or Haman and Baruch Mordechai, between the Nekuda Daka of Kedusha. There's a very sometimes small, profoundly hidden Kedusha which underlies everything which is good, and there's sometimes very small, profoundly hidden Tuma, which underlies everything which is bad and negative. We should be zeicha to have that Avchana. We should be zeicha to take the Avchana from Adar and from Purim to the rest of the year. We should be zeicha to Mechayin Mitzvah Mechayin Shemsumi At Lo Yada Bechiduro with all the Chumras, and we should be zeicha to see the ultimate Mechias Amalek Mimher V'Amenu Amen.